Hi everyone, I'm back with Cassandra Walsh with Adams and Reese. How are you doing today?
I'm living the dream, girl. Happy to be here. Thanks for having me.
Awesome. We were catching up before we came back, and she just got back from a river trip, floating the river, which is always a good, fun Texas tradition, you know? So,
Absolutely.
So tell the audience a little bit about yourself personally first.
Yeah, no, I'm happy to. Well, when I'm not practicing law, I obviously love to float the river as much as I can. I am a Texas transplant, so I got here as soon as I could, as they say. I was born in New Jersey, but I don't like to really tell people that because I don't want people to know that I'm a Yankee. But I grew up most of my life in Florida, went to school in Georgia, came to Texas about 10 years ago, and I've never looked back since. I love to fish. I love to volunteer. I volunteer quite a bit with the Special Olympics, and I coach softball. And I've got two little pups, Tucker and Gil, who I spend a ton of my time with.
Awesome.
Yeah.
That's a filled life, because I know law in its own probably consumes a lot of time from you.
It does.
So that's good. You spend a lot of time doing fun things. I've had several guests that involved in different charities and different things. So it's like always like I love to do that stuff too. But I'm like, I think I spread myself a little thin by volunteering sometimes too much, but
you got to go for it, girl. I mean, I love what I do. I have a blast practicing law every single day of my life. I wake up and I just can't wait to just jump in and get after it. But God put me on this earth to do that, but He also put me on this earth to serve others, and I just love volunteering and getting out there and enjoying the water and just having a great time.
Awesome. So tell me a little bit about your business and your professional and your law firm.
Sure. So Adams and Reese is a full-service law firm. We have offices from Texas all the way over to Florida and all the way up to Washington, D.C., and we kind of span the southeastern region of the United States. We don't only practice in those areas. We've got folks who are licensed all over the country, and we represent clients all over the country and really all over the world in certain cases. I myself am what I like to call a death and deals lawyer. So that does not mean that I'm doing deals with dead people or communicating with the beyond or any of that. I manage two teams personally. So on one hand, we do death-related issues. We tell banks who gets dead people's money when people pass away. We tell funeral home owners and operators who can be buried in certain places. We counsel clients through planning, both on the personal and business side, and we work on estate administrations. And then on the flip side, on the deal side, we counsel clients through deals of really all shapes, sizes, and colors, anything you can really think of.
Okay, so you kind of do all deals, really. Yep. Are there any specific, things that y'all do other than, death and
deals?
Business?
So the firm itself, like I said, we have a pretty wide array of industries where we represent folks. That's not necessarily something that my team does specifically, but realistically, if you're not getting divorced or you didn't get pulled over for a DUI, it's probably something our firm can handle. We tend to have pockets of experts in certain areas that sit in different offices, and really just that emerged organically. So we may have a big group of forestry experts who sit in our Mobile office who represent clients in the acquisition of timber lands or work through those types of issues. And we may have a group of tax experts who sit in our Columbia office who do tons of mergers and acquisitions, and who counsel clients through kind of complex tax-related issues. And we'll jump in on those types of deals when there's a Texas component to it. Mm-hmm. We've got one that we just are going to start working on that's going to be a pretty large transaction, $1 billion doozy of a transaction. So it's going to be a big team of folks sitting in Texas, Nashville, South Carolina, kind of all over our footprint.
Oh gosh, and I remember earlier you mentioned something to me when we were talking. We were walking in about 300-hour months and stuff like that. I'm like, that's insane, But of course, coming as a realtor, I mean, we work 24/7 as well.
Yeah.
So I feel the pain, but also the joy in that because I love waking up and going to work as well every day. Even whether there's challenges and positive things and negative things about every day, right?
Absolutely.
But you still enjoy what you do.
Oh yeah, I mean, real estate and the practice of law, especially in what I do, I practice quite a bit in the real estate side, and so I frequently am working with brokers and real estate agents, title companies, and it's kind of that unique kind of balance between quick, we got to get to closing, and wait, we got to make sure that all the title works right and all of the legal issues are handled. But I love working with people in that industry because they're all on it, they're responsive, they're the same way. They love what they do. Their client calls them at midnight, they're going to answer the phone. If somebody, needs to pull an all-nighter, they're going to get after it because they know that they got to get that closing done. And I appreciate people like that, and I think especially in my industry and kind of on my team, we kind of all tend toward each other, those types of people. And so I have a blast doing it. And so I have a lot of respect for realtors and people in the real estate industry because I know that that's exactly the way they spend their life too.
Well, let's take a deeper dive into that, kind of, what you do and how it relates to real estate and how it connects.
Sure. So on the real estate side, where it's a little interesting, we really touch real estate on both the death and the deal side. So on the death side, frequently we'll help clients work through estate planning issues. We might help people prepare, revocable transfer on death deeds, or we may help them with planning like ladybird deeds or Medicaid planning and that type of thing. We may work, with folks through creating trusts or holding property in land trusts and that type of thing. If people own property when they pass away, we'll work through a sale or a transfer of that property in various ways. One of the things on the real estate side that I have found is pretty unique is in circumstances where a person might pass away without a will. And so in Texas, if you pass away without a will, Texas law gives you a will, right? And it all depends upon if you were married or if you had children and kind of what your circumstances were at the time you passed. And depending on all of that, there may be a myriad of different interests or percentages that folks own in property. And so that can come into play and be pretty unique. And then on the flip side, depending on who's involved, if we've got a dependent administration pending, there's some very specific step-by-step processes that have to be followed in order to be able to even sell real estate in those circumstances, all the while still having to deal with perhaps a unique kind of division of interests. And so that's something that we counsel folks through quite a bit. It's something that I teach on quite a bit in the real estate industry. I'll do classes with real estate agents and brokers and kind of walk them through those processes so that they can understand that, they can explain that to their clients, and keep everybody on board and keep the deal alive. So that's something pretty unique that we do.
I think a lot of people don't even think they just think, once I have a kid or, once I own a piece of property, that's when I'll get a will and stuff. And it's like, you should always have a will, right? But people just don't think about it. And
there's definitely, and by no means am I advising anyone not to have a will, okay? I think that we should all have one. There's certainly some unique circumstances in Texas where maybe if you have a very small estate, or maybe you just own your homestead and a small amount of assets and not that many debts, maybe you could get away with not having a will and it would be a pretty simple process. But most certainly, if you buy real estate, if you have more than one piece of real estate, if you are married, if you have children, if you're in a second family situation, you really, really should be thinking about those issues so that you can make sure that you avoid a circumstance where perhaps you thought that your current spouse was going to be able to own the piece of property that you guys bought together or lived in together, but now all of a sudden he or she is surviving you after you pass away, and now they co-own that property with your children from a previous relationship. And frequently that just causes a lot of strife that can be avoided if you
just write it out and very detailed.
Just doesn't even have to be detailed. You can just say, I want my property to go to blank, and sign it.
So
You're good to go.
Crazy too that even I mean, we recently did it, and it was just one of those things that it was like, oh, even like how you want to be buried, was one of those questions, like, and I was kind of like, I never thought about if I want to be cremated or what I want to do, with myself, I guess, and it's just like those questions come about, and you're like, kind of like, what's, excuse me, what. I don't know. It just kind of made it really awkward, to think about it. And it was like, okay, take it home, read all the questions, kind of think through it. But there's a lot of things that you don't think about. Like, okay, if your parents are gone, and you put them down for your children, or who you put down, your sister. If your sister's not there, then your brother. And then,
right.
Just kind of who everything goes to.
Yeah.
Who gets the, if your husband's gone, or your spouse, or your girlfriend, or whoever, who gets to pull the plug,
right.
or, something like that, it's just,
yeah.
It's not like it's a funny, but it's just something interesting. And I don't think that on a daily basis, people think about that,
It's just so difficult to contemplate, your own mortality,
Yeah.
and I think a lot of people get superstitious about it. They think if I go down this path and I say, who gets my stuff, or who's going to take care of my children when I pass, or what all that's going to look like, I'm kind of tempting fate, because now it's like, all right, here we go. We've got the documents in place. We're going to be good to go. I will say that during COVID, I don't know if it was a product of folks being nervous that something might happen to them, or perhaps just having a little bit more time on their hand.
Probably a combination of both.
I think it's maybe a combo of both, but the demand on the estate planning side was astronomical. People just really wanting to make sure they had something in place, and it was responsible. It's the responsible decision to make. What's interesting about the point you made about how you want to be buried is that's kind of one of those unique kind of real estate / death issues that we counsel folks through quite a bit. In Texas, you might own burial plots, but they're not treated the same way as normal real property would be treated in the state of Texas. And so if you're going to convey a burial plot to another family member, right, or you're going to want another family member to have the right to be buried in a burial plot, you have to specifically identify that burial plot in your will. And if you don't, then the Texas Health and Safety Code has all of these very unique kind of, and again, all kind of depending on circumstances. Were you married? Did you have written instructions? Do you have other children? And how does this all work? And in the order of whose need and all of this stuff. And it can get really complicated when, again, if you just want to make sure that all of that's clear, not only should you put it in your will, if you want to deal with burial plots, you have to. You don't have any other option, or it's going to just fall, to the default that the state law gives you.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So death and deals, such an interesting kind of thing to go into. Kind of what tempted you, or what made you go into this branch of law? So
it's kind of unique. I always joke that for years I just kind of did whatever my bosses told me to do, right? And I kind of just learned as I went. And so one day I was like, what do I really do for a living? Like, what do I actually do? And I sat down and I realized death and deals is what I do. And where that grew out of, so I was a paralegal for 9 years before I became an attorney. And I worked in Florida and Georgia, and then in Texas when I moved here. And I actually did real estate work on the transactional side when I first started kind of working as a paralegal. I also answered the phones, did the filing, went and got lunch, and definitely paid my dues in the industry and kind of worked my way up. When I moved to Texas, I got a job as a probate paralegal. I did probate and estate planning work, and then I went to work for the probate courts in Harris County while I was in law school. And so doing that work was really interesting because you learn the death side, and all the death law in Texas is pretty code based, so it's kind of, you can kind of gain an understanding of how that works over the course of time. But what's interesting about that practice is, okay, I know how to do the procedure, but also when people die, right, or when people are planning for their death, they own things, they own businesses, they own real property, they own stuff in their house. And so you kind of learn over the course of time doing that work, well, okay, this person owned a business and they're going to sell it to a willing purchaser. Well, okay, how do you work through an M&A transaction, right? Mm-hmm. And same kind of thing. Someone owns a piece of real property, either commercial or residential, what have you. Well, how do you work through the sale, right? And you just kind of learn as you go. So in that circumstance, I learned kind of the formula for how those transactions take place. And so over the course of time, it just kind of organically grew.
It's gonna happen naturally in a
yeah.
way.
Yeah,
And it became interesting, and you kind of start digging more. And you're like, I have all this knowledge. Why don't I put it to a good use?
Yeah, absolutely. And from that standpoint, so like on the death side, we do quite a bit of work on that side. On the deal side, folks are buying or selling assets, equipment. If people are buying and selling real estate, if people are buying, I say people, businesses are buying or selling a business, or leases, or negotiating contracts, if they need to lien property, whatever that looks like, that's all stuff that we do on the deal side. And it's stuff that, again, kind of grew organically over time, really fits well together in my own brain. And it's something I love. It's just, I love to do it. I love to do both sides, and it keeps it interesting and it keeps it fun.
Cool. Well, if you have to leave with one little bit of information for people today, what would you like to tell everyone?
I would say, so again, I think that my area of practice, sometimes when people hear it, they think, okay, well, how does that fit into what, my needs might be? Or if I have a client who has a specific need, how can you really dig into that? And what I usually tell people is that is exactly the reason I work for a firm, right? So like I mentioned from the outset, I sit in Houston. We've got an office here in Houston, but we have we've got 300 attorneys and probably double that in staff, all across the southeastern United States, who all have their own unique subject matter expertise in various areas. And so what I love about my firm is that someone will call me and say, hey, do you know someone who could help with this very unique tax issue? Well, I can't, I can't. And I'm going to run away screaming if you ask me to. But hey, guess what? My partner in Colombia can jump on that for you. And it goes that way across the board. People will do the same thing back. And so I think that the takeaway would be that if you have a need or something pops up, even if it's not on the death or deal side, quite literally, if you're not getting divorced or you didn't get arrested for a DUI, call me if you need help. If it's not something that I can do, it's something that either perhaps my team can help with or one of my partners in another office. And that's what I just love about my firm. We're all kind of that long hallways approach. Everyone's just a phone call away.
Perfect. Well, let them know how they can get a hold of you.
Absolutely. I think my info's up there on the screen. So you can click to our website, which is www.adamsandreese.com. You can also shoot me an email anytime at cassandra.walsh@arlaw.com. Thanks so much for having me.
Awesome. Thank you for coming. I appreciate you guys watching today. And once again, thank you Now Media TV for having me. We'll see you next week.